could a peaceful luxury voyage carrying elderly couples and families transform into one of the most terrifying hostage crises in recent maritime history? On July 26, 2025, international waters off Somalia became the scene of a nightmare that shook not only the passengers aboard, but also the wider world. At precisely 6:15 in the morning, the cruise liner Pacific Monarch, hosting nearly 1,000 US citizens, suddenly faced a storm of gunfire and explosions as 140 heavily armed pirates launched a coordinated assault. They arrived in 20 speedboats, 7 men crammed into each vessel, their faces concealed with masks, their torsos bare, their eyes reflecting only hunger for blood and money. These were not the ragtag raiders of the past. This was a disciplined strike force equipped with AK-style rifles, machetes, and crude grenades. According to Western naval analysts, this scale of piracy attack has not been recorded in over a decade. Experts at Jane's Defense Weekly have noted that such a large synchronized operation hints at backing from organized crime syndicates operating across the Horn of Africa. As the speedboats closed in, the pirates fired indiscriminately. Windows shattered glass rained down on terrified tourists, and the decks ran red. Women were forced to their knees, their belongings stripped away. VIP areas were ransacked in a desperate search for high-value hostages. Within minutes, over 100 civilians were herded into the central ballroom, while others were cornered near the stern. The Pacific Monarch, once a floating symbol of leisure, had been turned into a prison at sea. But the pirates had miscalculated. Unknown to them, Captain Richard Kane, a 62-year-old former naval officer, had already triggered a covert SOS system. The message was chilling in its simplicity: cruise ship under attack, immediate action. Within 4 minutes, U.S. Central Command received the signal. At a base 220 nautical miles away, Admiral Samuel V. Turner, who had led 17 international rescue missions, ordered the rapid deployment of assets. This moment underscores a critical lesson of modern conflict: timing is everything. In hostage scenarios, every second lost can mean lives taken. That urgency has become even more relevant in the broader global climate of 2025, where asymmetric warfare, be it pirates, drones, or proxy militias, constantly tests Western response times. In Ukraine, fast Russian drone swarms have forced NATO to accelerate its own counter-drone tactics. In the Persian Gulf, Iranian speedboats have harassed shipping lanes demanding lightning US responses. And in the South China Sea, Chinese militia vessels shadow American warships probing for weaknesses. The incident with the Pacific Monarch mirrored all of these tensions in miniature, a test of speed, precision, and resolve. As Admiral Turner mobilized a Virginia-class nuclear submarine altered course beneath the Indian Ocean. At the same time, an MQ-9 Reaper drone took position above its infrared sensors, mapping the cruise ship in 3 dimensions. 2 snipers parachuted from a C-130 positioning themselves for overwatch. And most remarkably, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer closed in pretending to negotiate ransom, distracting the pirates from the silent steel lurking beneath them. This multi-domain response air, sea, and underwater was not improvised. It reflected years of US Navy doctrine emphasizing layered synchronized pressure. Experts from Defense News describe it as a textbook application of distributed lethality, where every American platform from submarine to drone acts as both sensor and shooter. The pirates, however, remained oblivious. They saw only panicked hostages and a seemingly helpless ship, but for those inside the Navy command room, a countdown had already begun. 40 SEALs aboard the submarine waited in silence, helmets on, preparing to emerge into a floating battlefield. Their mission was codenamed Silent Steel. Their objective: neutralize 100 armed men without losing a single civilian. The stakes were monumental, not only for the 978 passengers aboard, but also for the credibility of the United States. Failure would signal weakness at a time when adversaries in Moscow, Tehran, and Beijing were already testing the limits of Western deterrence. Success would send a clear message that no American life, no matter how remote the threat, would be abandoned. But the question loomed large: could just 40 SEALs truly outmatch 140 armed pirates without civilian casualties? And if this was possible, what did it say about the future of special operations in an era where irregular threats from pirates to proxy militias are growing more complex by the day? By the time the pirates believed they had secured their hostages, the US Navy's plan was already unfolding with the precision of a Swiss watch. Admiral Samuel V. Turner, overseeing operations from a command hub 220 nautical miles away, coordinated a rapid, multi-layered strike. This response highlighted how the United States has adapted to new global threats in 2025, where unconventional actors like pirates, drone militias, and cyber saboteurs increasingly dominate the battlefield. Within minutes of the SOS, a Virginia-class nuclear submarine slid silently through the depths, carrying 40 Navy SEALs. Above, an MQ-9 Reaper hovered, feeding real-time data to both Central Command and the SEALs' heads-up displays. On the surface, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer played a dangerous game of deception, simulating ransom negotiations to divert the pirates' focus. And in the skies, a C-130 had already released sniper teams who glided into position with uncanny silence. This orchestration of air, sea, and undersea assets illustrated the concept of joint all-domain operations, the future of warfare, as NATO strategists describe it. The timeline was brutal and unforgiving. Analysts from the BBC later noted that the Navy's entire response window was less than 40 minutes. Any delay risked mass executions or a catastrophic fire aboard the cruise ship. Such urgency mirrors what has been seen in other hotspots in 2025, Ukrainian forces racing to intercept Russian drone barrages in minutes, or US destroyers in the Strait of Hormuz countering swarms of Iranian boats before they could close within missile range. The Pacific Monarch crisis became another test case for this doctrine of rapid dominance. Captain Richard Kane, trapped with nearly 1,000 civilians, had one task: hold the pirates' attention long enough for help to arrive. The destroyer, posing as negotiator, relayed fake willingness to discuss ransom while deliberately stalling. Inside the ballroom, terrified hostages huddled on the floor, unaware that salvation was already approaching from the sea below. The SEALs on board the Virginia-class submarine operated under a code name Silent Steel. Each team had rehearsed dozens of infiltration scenarios. At 0702, the submarine rose to within 80 feet of the surface, deploying SEALs in 4-man squads. They wore advanced climbing suits equipped with magnetic tethers and suction devices to scale the smooth hull of the cruise liner. No sound betrayed their ascent. Overhead, the Reaper drone painted a heat map of pirate movements, revealing that more than 120 hostages were corralled in the ballroom, while dozens more were scattered in cabins near the stern. Admiral Turner's strategy reflected decades of US counterterrorism experience. Analysts at Defense News later remarked that the operation resembled aspects of both counter-piracy missions off the Horn of Africa in the early 2010s and hostage rescues in Iraq and Syria. But what set this apart was the sheer scale: 140 attackers against 40 commandos, all unfolding on a vessel packed with civilians. It was a high-wire act with no room for error. Meanwhile, the global press was already buzzing. As news trickled out of an ongoing hostage crisis at sea, markets wavered. Oil prices jumped by nearly $2 a barrel, reflecting fears of instability along critical shipping lanes near the Gulf of Aden. Western analysts drew parallels to past disruptions, warning that even temporary insecurity in these waters could ripple across global supply chains. From the tactical perspective, the SEALs moved with clockwork precision. Alpha Team positioned near ventilation shafts above the ballroom. Bravo Team advanced quietly along the starboard lifeboat deck. Charlie Team infiltrated service corridors armed with suppressed MP7s and signal jammers. Each squad had its zone, and none could fire until the green light was given. At 0729, Commander Harris delivered that order: green light, lock all zones, no friendly fire. The clock had run out for the pirates. What followed would unfold in seconds, but its consequences would echo across the globe. For US allies, the question was whether this operation signaled a new gold standard in hostage rescue. For America's rivals, Russia, Iran, and China, it was a reminder that even in unconventional battlefields, the United States could bring overwhelming power to bear with speed and silence. Would this audacious gamble by Admiral Turner and his SEALs prove that America could neutralize massive threats without sacrificing innocent lives? Or would it risk plunging nearly 1,000 civilians into tragedy? The world waited as the trigger was pulled. At 0702, beneath the calm surface of the Indian Ocean, the Virginia-class submarine slowed its approach to a crawl. Inside, the 40 SEALs sat in absolute silence, fully aware that in a matter of minutes, they would step into a labyrinth of hostages, explosives, and gunfire. The mission, named Silent Steel, captured the essence of what was required: ruthless efficiency without a single civilian casualty. The fate of nearly 1,000 Americans, most of them elderly tourists, depended on flawless execution. Emerging from the hatch, the first teams entered the water using state-of-the-art climbing gear designed to grip the slick hull of the Pacific Monarch. In pairs and fours, they rose like phantoms, attaching themselves magnetically unseen by the gunmen patrolling the upper decks. Overhead, the MQ-9 Reaper continued to scan with infrared precision, feeding every movement of the pirates into the SEALs' visors. Command had confirmed that over 120 hostages were trapped in the central ballroom, with another 40 scattered across the stern cabins. Most of the attackers were still distracted by the Arleigh Burke destroyer engaged in fake ransom talks. By 07:22, all 3 SEAL fire teams had secured their entry points. Alpha Team held position above the ballroom, Bravo Team crept along the lifeboat deck, and Charlie Team infiltrated the service corridors with suppressed MP7s and electronic jammers. Every breath, every footfall was deliberate. Collateral damage was not an option. This level of tactical patience reflects the broader doctrine of special operations in 2025. Western analysts have repeatedly emphasized that modern hostage rescues are not won by overwhelming firepower, but by synchronized precision. A similar doctrine is evident in Ukraine, where small units armed with drones and precision rifles often achieve disproportionate effects against numerically superior Russian forces. In the Middle East, Israel has employed similar tactics in Gaza using silent infiltration before striking high-value militant cells. The principle is universal patience multiplies effectiveness. Inside the ballroom, thermal scans revealed 5 pirates pacing nervously with rifles, one positioned at the main entrance, clearly acting as leader. Alpha Team was ordered to hold fire and await synchronization. At the same time, the second Reaper drone identified a group of pirates preparing lifeboats at the stern, intending to transfer hostages. Time was running out. Commander Harris, orchestrating from a forward observation node, transmitted the order at 07:29, execute all zones go. The transition from silence to chaos was instantaneous. Alpha Team deployed a flashbang through the ventilation shaft above the ballroom. The blast erupted in a muted thump, flooding the room with blinding light and deafening shock. Within a fraction of a second, 2 pirates dropped, struck by subsonic rounds delivered from above. A third attempted to seize a hostage as a shield, but collapsed under precise double shots to his clavicle. Simultaneously, Bravo Team stormed through a service stairwell, sweeping the corridor with silenced fire. One pirate dragging a woman by her arm was neutralized before he reached the next step. Another, prying open a lifeboat hatch, crumpled instantly under a single round to the base of the skull. Hostages were commanded firmly but calmly. Stay down, hands up, you're safe. Charlie Team moved like shadows through the kitchens. They confronted 4 pirates barricaded behind metal trolleys. One attempted to hurl a grenade, but he never managed to release the pin. Charlie's lead operator dropped him with a single suppressed shot. Their jammers cut off pirate communications, leaving the attackers blind and isolated. Overhead, Sniper Team Viper recently inserted by parachute engaged pirates attempting to flee toward escape boats. From 1,800 feet above sea level, they eliminated 5 in less than half a minute. The last 2 surrendered, throwing their rifles overboard. By 07:37, over 60 pirates had been neutralized, yet the danger was far from over. Suddenly, a figure charged from the central stairwell, a pirate armed with a suicide vest. SEAL Corporal Mason tackled him mid-sprint, striking him unconscious with the muzzle of his suppressed rifle before the trigger could be reached. Elsewhere, another SEAL was grazed in the shoulder, but refused evacuation, pressing forward with his team. What the world was witnessing was not just a rescue, but a demonstration of military discipline under unimaginable pressure. Analysts later compared it to legendary special operations such as Entebbe in 1976, or the raid on Osama bin Laden's compound. Yet this mission stood apart. Never before had such a large group of attackers been confronted in such a confined civilian-packed environment at sea. Could 40 SEALs truly continue to overpower 140 heavily armed men, or would attrition take its toll before the final hostage was freed? At 07:31, the whisper of orders in the SEALs' earpieces transformed into controlled chaos. The assault was underway, and within seconds, the Pacific Monarch shifted from suffocating terror to a battlefield dominated by American precision. Alpha Team's flashbang had left the pirates in the ballroom blinded and disoriented. 2 dropped before they even understood what hit them. The third, clutching a hostage, was neutralized by surgical shots that left the civilian unharmed. The sudden violence shattered the illusion of pirate control. Screams turned into stunned silence as hostages realized the US Navy had arrived. Bravo team advanced relentlessly through the service stairwells. They found one pirate dragging a woman toward a lifeboat. He collapsed instantly under suppressed fire. Another attacker forcing open an emergency hatch was taken down with a shot to the skull, his body slipping quietly overboard. Hostages were ordered to lie flat, hands visible as the SEALs moved past. Every gesture communicated authority, reassurance, and urgency. Meanwhile, Charlie team breached the kitchens. 4 pirates had attempted to turn steel carts into makeshift barricades. One tried to lob a grenade. He never stood a chance drop before the pin left his hand. Within seconds, Charlie's jammer silenced pirate radios, cutting off coordination across decks. The attackers, once confident and united, were now deaf and blind. Above the chaos, Sniper Team Viper delivered surgical precision. From 1,800 feet, they targeted pirates racing toward lifeboats, eliminating 5 in under 30 seconds. 2 others, faced with the sudden death of their comrades, threw down their rifles and raised their hands. It was a chilling reminder that even in open waters, American reach extended from sky to sea with deadly efficiency. By ZO 7:37, the operation had already neutralized over 60 attackers, yet victory was not secured. A pirate armed with an explosive belt stormed the central stairwell in a desperate suicide charge. SEAL Corporal Mason intercepted him, tackling him mid-run and rendering him unconscious with brutal efficiency before detonation could occur. Elsewhere, another SEAL sustained a grazing wound but continued to fight. At this point, US military analysts monitoring live feeds began to realize the scale of what was happening. In less than 10 minutes of direct engagement, elite forces had dismantled nearly half the pirate contingent without a single civilian death. Jane's Defense Weekly later described the mission as the most complex and successful maritime hostage rescue of the 21st century. The precision of Silent Steel was not only a tactical triumph, it was also a strategic signal. Around the same time, news of the assault was breaking across global networks. Reuters and BBC carried headlines of an ongoing US Navy operation in the Indian Ocean. Stock markets already jittery from tensions in the South China Sea, and Iranian provocations in the Strait of Hormuz reacted with volatility. Energy prices spiked, reflecting fears that piracy could once again destabilize critical maritime lanes. For Washington, the timing was crucial. President Donald Trump, briefed in real time, demanded an outcome that demonstrated zero tolerance for hostage takers. In an election year with global rivals watching closely, there was no room for compromise. The White House wanted not only a rescue, but also a deterrent message to adversaries from Moscow to Tehran to Beijing that the United States would respond anywhere, anytime. By ZO 7:42, the final corridors were being cleared. Hostages, though shaken, were alive. SEALs moved cabin by cabin, securing survivors and disarming attackers. 3 operators sustained minor injuries, but the momentum was undeniable. The entire cruise liner, once a prison under pirate control, was rapidly turning into a fortress under US command. Would the remaining pirates continue to fight to the last bullet, or would they realize the futility of resistance against an unstoppable tide of steel, discipline, and silence? By 07:43, the gunfire that had shaken the Pacific Monarch began to fade into silence. The SEALs' coordinated strikes had crippled the pirate force, but scattered resistance still lingered across the decks. The objective was not yet complete. Every corridor, every cabin, every stairwell needed to be cleared. Failure to secure even a single compartment could leave civilians exposed to a final act of violence. In the engine room, 2 pirates were discovered cowering behind fuel crates. They surrendered instantly, raising their hands before a shot was fired. On the upper promenade, 3 more attackers attempted to blend with terrified hostages. They were quickly identified, restrained, and zip-tied under armed guard. The balance of power had shifted completely. Then, under the rising sun at the stern of the ship, the final confrontation unfolded. 12 pirates, barefoot, exhausted, and drenched in sweat, emerged in a huddle. Their weapons had been tossed overboard. One waved a white scrap of cloth torn from a bedsheet as a makeshift flag of surrender. They collapsed to their knees, begging for mercy. US forces followed strict protocol. They were searched, cuffed, and lined up for helicopter extraction. The scale of the operation became clear. More than 70 pirates were killed, 20 critically wounded, and the remainder captured. Not a single civilian life was lost. 3 SEALs sustained injuries, 2 from shrapnel, 1 from close quarters combat, but all were expected to make full recoveries. The entire battle from first strike to last clearance had lasted less than 19 minutes. Passengers erupted in tears and applause. Elderly couples embraced. A little girl waved a small American flag she had brought for the voyage, holding it high toward the SEALs who had saved her family. Over the ship's loudspeakers, Captain Kane's voice broke through, "You are safe, and you have the United States Navy to thank for it." Medics boarded immediately, distributing food, water, and blankets. Trauma teams checked each passenger for injuries or shock. Helicopters circled overhead, securing the skies. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyer that had played decoy launched boats to retrieve captured pirates. By hour 8:10, the cruise liner was fully under U.S. control, flanked by warships and protected from above by UAVs. Western defense analysts were quick to highlight the achievement. DW in Germany described it as a flawless example of maritime counter-terrorism. The Guardian emphasized the humanitarian dimension every civilian had survived. Military Watch magazine pointed out that the operation reaffirmed U.S. dominance in joint operations, combining submarine stealth, UAV intelligence, airborne sniping, and SEAL precision in a single coordinated strike. Yet the implications extended beyond tactics. In Moscow, state media dismissed the incident as Hollywood theatrics, but Russian naval commanders privately noted the effectiveness of American response times. In Tehran, hardline outlets warned that Iran's Revolutionary Guard should study the mission closely, as it mirrored potential U.S. responses to hostage scenarios in the Strait of Hormuz. And in Beijing, where tensions with Washington continued to rise over the South China Sea, strategists were reminded that even a small U.S. Special Forces contingent could dismantle a numerically superior force within minutes. The rescue of the Pacific Monarch was more than a military operation. It was a declaration of principle. In a world where proxy militias, pirates, and hybrid threats increasingly challenge Western powers, Washington had shown that it would act decisively with speed and precision to protect its citizens. President Trump, briefed shortly after the mission ended, reportedly emphasized that no American life, no matter where, is beyond our reach to defend. But as global powers digested the success of Silent Steel, a larger question emerged. Was this a singular triumph or a preview of how the United States will confront irregular threats in future conflicts across the globe? The morning sun had fully risen by the time the Pacific Monarch was secured, its decks littered with shattered weapons and broken glass, but alive with nearly 1,000 grateful passengers. For those on board, the nightmare was over. For Washington, however, the operation marked something far larger, a statement of doctrine and power. In less than 19 minutes, the United States had demonstrated the capacity to coordinate assets across every domain: submarine destroyer, UAV sniper, overwatch, and special forces, while preserving every civilian life. It was not simply a tactical rescue. It was a broadcast to allies and adversaries alike. NATO commanders, already strained by Russia's relentless drone and artillery campaigns in Ukraine, pointed to Silent Steel as proof that joint all-domain integration is not theoretical, it works in practice. German defense experts on DW argued that such operations highlight why European navies must accelerate modernization, especially in the Mediterranean and Baltic, where Russian naval pressure continues to grow. For adversaries, the message was stark. In Tehran, hardliners were reminded that any attempt to seize Western tankers or cruise liners in the Persian Gulf could end with similar precision. In Beijing, analysts studying the South China Sea disputes saw that American forces could execute a coordinated strike faster than militia vessels or Coast Guard ships could react. Even in Moscow, where propaganda sought to downplay the event, military circles quietly acknowledged that U.S. rapid response capabilities remain unmatched despite years of Russian hybrid warfare experience. This success also reignited debate about the future of piracy and asymmetric threats. According to the International Maritime Bureau, global piracy incidents had dropped in the early 2020s, but surged again by 2025, particularly off the Horn of Africa. Experts argue that many of these groups are no longer isolated criminals, but are increasingly tied to organized smuggling networks, some with covert state backing. If true, then the Battle of the Pacific Monarch was not just about pirates, it was part of the wider struggle between Western powers and rival states using proxies to test global resolve. Western commentators drew historical parallels. The Entebbe raid in 1976, the storming of Maersk, Alabama in 2009, and the Bin Laden raid in 2011 all became symbols of national determination. Now Silent Steel joined that list. What set it apart was its scale: 140 attackers neutralized by 40 SEALs with 0 civilian casualties. Jane's Defense Weekly called it an operation that will be studied in military academies for decades. President Donald Trump, speaking from the White House, underlined the broader implications America will defend its people anywhere on Earth with speed and with steel. No negotiation, no surrender. The statement was as much aimed at voters at home as it was at adversaries abroad. In a year when U.S. forces are stretched between commitments in Europe, the Middle East, and the Pacific, projecting resolve was critical. The geopolitical ripples extended into NATO councils. Some European allies urged greater investment in naval rapid response forces, warning that the incident highlighted vulnerabilities in global shipping lanes. Others worried that the United States' overwhelming success might embolden Washington to act unilaterally in future crises. Meanwhile, China and Russia condemned the mission as escalatory, even as their own analysts privately acknowledged the flawless execution. But beyond strategy, the human element carried the most powerful weight. Survivors described moments of sheer terror transformed into relief as SEALs burst into rooms with calm commands. "You're safe now." Families wept, couples embraced, and a child waving a small American flag became the image broadcast worldwide. For the passengers, it was not only a rescue, but also proof of the unbreakable bond between citizens and their defenders. As the global community reflected, one truth stood clear in an age where irregular threats from pirates to militias to cyber attacks blur the lines of war and peace. The United States had delivered a reminder of its core principle. Every American life matters, and every hostile act will be met with decisive force. Yet the operation also left an open question: will future enemies escalate learning from the pirates' defeat, or will the sheer efficiency of silent steel deter others from ever attempting such bold acts again? The assault on the Pacific Monarch in July 2025 was more than a pirate hijacking. It was a test of U.S. resolve at sea. In less than 19 minutes, 40 Navy SEALs, backed by submarines, destroyers, drones, and snipers, neutralized 140 attackers without a single civilian loss. The mission, codenamed Silent Steel, showcased the pinnacle of joint all-domain warfare precision, speed, and coordination across air, sea, and undersea platforms. Its impact rippled far beyond the Indian Ocean. For NATO, it reinforced the necessity of modernization in an era where Russia, Iran, and China exploit hybrid tactics. For adversaries, it sent a warning that no proxy force, however large, can outmatch American discipline and steel. For the world, it reaffirmed a principle: the United States protects its own. But the rescue also raised questions that will shape the future. Can the West maintain this standard of rapid dominance across multiple theaters at once? Will rivals escalate, adapting with deadlier technology? Or will deterrence hold? As viewers reflect on the bravery of those 40 SEALs and the relief of nearly 1,000 civilians, one must ask, what does Silent Steel mean for the next crisis at sea? If this story kept you watching, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts. Do you believe this operation will deter future threats, or is it only the beginning of even more dangerous confrontations?